Hello, everybody. It's Alison Sainsbury from the Strategy MVP Council. Thanks for joining us. I'm really excited about this, and I'm not going to take any time at the beginning. So this is basically our agenda for today. Up first, we have Barend, who's going to talk to us about marketing automation.
Yeah, thanks, Alison. Hi, everybody. Great to have you all in this webinar. I'm not going to give you a presentation in PowerPoint. I'm going to give hopefully a demo that will work, but a couple of words about me. My name is Barend Emmerzaal. I work as a business consultant at Macaw in the Netherlands. Macaw has offices in the Netherlands, Germany, and Lithuania, and we're a full service agency focusing on customer experience and employee experience. And we have all kinds of services and solutions around it based on Microsoft and Sitecore technology. What I'm going to show you today is kind of an inspirational demo where I'm going to combine a couple of features together, and that is for goals, forms, profiles, email marketing, and with that personalization all tied together with marketing automation. Things that I see a lot is that when companies are starting with personalization and profiling, it's mainly by tagging pages and creating some personalization rules, which is great. But with marketing automation, you have another way of profiling and with that personalizing the customer experience. And it gives you a lot more power to automate the customer experience instead of manual jobs. So with that, I'm going to turn into my demo, and hopefully something goes wrong. Otherwise, it isn't a good demo, a live demo. So let's see. I'm going to switch between some screens because I have my local environment where I'm the only visitor, and I have a couple of browsers. So we have to deal with cookies and sessions and stuff like that. But I have prepared a simple site landing page. With that that I'm going to personalize. What I'm going to do is sending an email with marketing automation, and from there the user is going to land on this page, and I have created a kind of information wizard where one can answer a couple of simple questions and is redirected to a certain page. And while doing so, a couple of goals are triggered. And I'm using that in another automation campaign to set certain profile keys for a user and to create a profile. So let's start by adding a user first. And this is normally something that you would do from a CRM sync where you have contacts going in a certain list, or if you have perhaps a manual import. So for the demo, I'm going to do this manually, but usually this is generated and automated for you. What happens now is that a contact is added to my list, to my marketing list. There it is, Sitecore 15. And in here I have a marketing automation campaign that listens to that list, and the moment someone is entered to that list, it's going in this campaign and an email is sent. Now this can take a couple of minutes on my environment, so we're going to see that email in a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, I have already sent some emails to speed up this demo. So I have Sitecore 9 and 10 here. So this is a very simple email sent with Sitecore EXM. I haven't changed the contents too much, it's just a basic template of EXM. And the moment I'm going to click this link, a new browser will open, a new tab, and the site is loaded. The site that you're going to see in the other window is the same as this one, of course, but the things that will change after I use this wizard is this intro text, and I'm going to hide this wizard. So here is the tab based on the email that I used, and in here I'm going to say, well, I am, for example, a CMO. So this is Sitecore Forms wizard, where I ask a couple of questions to understand who the person is and redirect him to the right information. So it says, hi CMO, and this is no personalization. Actually, it's done with basic forms conditions out of the box available to you. but it's very easy and nice to use it. So when I'm choosing a certain topic, I'm hitting next. It asks me for another email address. I leave it as it is right now, and I'm redirecting to this page. So I'm going to switch back for a couple of minutes because what is happening in the background is the following. I have my automation campaign here, and I will explain it briefly. The moment someone starts using the wizard, a goal is triggered, and that's the trigger to enroll the contact in this campaign. And I'm going to increase the engagement value because he is engaging with me, he's interacting with me, leaving valuable information behind because he has selected his level. And from there, I'm going to check if the CMO goal is triggered or not. If so, he's going to the yes path. And in here, I'm going to change the, I have to hide this one. I'm sorry. I'm going to change the behavior profile, and I have set it to CMO and increase it with 1. And this is a very, very basic setup, just to show you what can be achieved. But with this, the profile CMO is now assigned to the user. If the CMO goal is not triggered, because in the, let me switch back to this one, in the first question I had the CMO, CXO, CIO roles. So based on the choices, different goals are triggered. So I do a couple of checks based on the choices and the certain goals that belongs to it. And based on the correct one, a different profile key is actually set. So when I look at an example of one of my demo visitors, you will see that when I'm going down, the best pattern match is here CMO. So I've actually, within this automation campaign, set a certain profile key, and with that a profile in my setup, but it can be a more complex combination, of course. You can make it as complex as you need. But I don't use the profile and pattern options on the pages, which is also an option within Sitecore. You can tag pages that belongs to a certain profile or that belongs to certain profile keys, and that build up the profile as the user is going through your site. But I'm using automation to set the profile. And with that, I have the profile and some goals to personalize the experience. So when I'm switching back to my site, when I'm going back to my homepage, you will see that it actually says now, hi there, CMO, great to have you back. And in here, I have hidden the form. I have also added something else in the campaign, just because we can. If someone has a certain match on the goal that was triggered and a profile is assigned, I'm sending an email. I've only done that for the CMO one. So when someone is in the CMO path, profile is assigned, and I'm sending him a simple email. And that email just came in here. Hi, Sitecore 9, we have something cool. For the demo, it's just the same basic email, but I have added, for the sake of the demo, a link to a different page. But the cool thing is, if you go back, it of course still says hi CMO, but I have set up some other emails, and I have to, hopefully I did choose the right one, where I have chosen the CX. No, let me see if this was the one. Where I have chosen the CXO role. And here it is. Here you will see that it says now, hi there, CXO, great to have you back. So with that, you can very easily start with personalization and profiling without taking all kinds of pages, but use a marketing automation to do it for you. And you can imagine that, for example, by using more listeners or decision points, you can build up a richer profile to identify in what certain conditions, under what conditions or profile conditions you want different profile keys to be assigned or not, and create rich profiles that you can use in email marketing and personalization on the homepage. With that, I think I'm almost out of time, and I want to thank you all for listening.
Dennis?
I am here. I think that's my cue.
You're good to go.
Excellent. We're going to be talking about B2B tactics, business-to-business tactics, leveraging Demandbase for Sitecore. I was so excited when Konabos came across the Demandbase platform some years ago. Community Staples, Actface Sura, and Cam Ruse had worked on the original Demandbase for Sitecore integration. And most recently, we were called on to upgrade that. And so being a new strategy MVP and hearing about all of these awesome B2B superpowers that Demandbase gives us, I was very, very excited, and I'm excited to share that with you today. I'm Dennis Augustine. I'm a CX architect and partner over at Konabos. And with me today is Mimi Rosenheim, is the Senior Director of Digital Marketing at Demandbase, and I'm so glad she could join us here today to tell us a little bit more about Demandbase and the integration and all the stuff that it empowers for Sitecore. I want to share some breaking news. Today we'll be releasing the integration, the updated integration for 9.0 and 9.3. That's going to be available for free on GitHub. And I want to shout out Valer, the good folks at Valer. We were contracted by them to do that integration, and they graciously talked to their customer and agreed to open source that for the community. So thank you to them for that. We have a really packed agenda for a few minutes, so we're going to really just have a little bit of an introduction to what Demandbase is all about, what this ABM game is really about as well. And then Mimi and I are going to tell you a little bit about how you can get some marketing superpowers, what I like to call X-ray vision, using data so that we can do some really incredible things with Demandbase and Sitecore that we probably couldn't do with either of those things alone. And then we'll try to make it very practical for you, showing you some tactical things that you can do in minutes, hours, and days, which Mimi has graciously set up and will walk us through as we go through that. And we'll review some, conclude with some conclusions and some resources that you can use to implement some of these tactics yourselves in your organization. So first of all, I want to really just count on Mimi here to kind of let us know a little bit more about Demandbase. Mimi, what is ABM all about? What's the Demandbase space all about? Let us know why we should really care about Demandbase and ABM marketing.
Yeah, thanks. So I've been doing digital marketing for 20-something years, and one of the biggest problems has been to be able to connect what we do on the web and with what sales cares about with business outcomes. And so one of the things that has been built over time has been the technology to have an account-based lens that measures your digital programs to business outcomes. So Demandbase is a comprehensive account-based marketing platform that helps you get insights into what's happening in your digital and allows you to take action all the way through to your full funnel. So we're a comprehensive ABM platform that has been recognized by Forrester as being the leader in the space. So we're super, super excited about that.
Absolutely. And when I really got to know more about Demandbase and how we could put those two things together, I think both you and I, when we spoke, were very excited about the sorts of scenarios that we could enable. But before we get into those practical scenarios, I want to take a really quick look at ABM marketing or account-based marketing. And to many of us on the strategy front in Sitecore, like myself, I've been focused on the consumer for a long time. And so ABM is kind of a new concept to me. I've heard a lot about B2B marketing, but ABM kind of has a sort of a different niche. What is that really all about? And what is enabled by kind of taking an ABM approach to B2B marketing?
Yeah, thanks. You know, I worked at Adobe and was in charge of their website for many years. And one of the biggest challenges was understanding who was actually coming to the site and being able to partition and segment those people so that we could understand what they were doing on the site and then present them with the experience that we need in order to drive the business. And the reality is around 80% of the people who come to your site are not actually ever going to be customers. So having an account-based marketing lens, being able to identify the anonymous traffic that's coming to your site and turn it into recognized traffic from accounts that you're interested in, that is a game changer, because it absolutely changes what you do on the site and how you make decisions around how you optimize what content you put up there, and even whether your site is being successful or not, and the other parts of the digital mix that drives the traffic there.
Awesome. When I heard about the ABM space and I started doing the integration, and folks will get into the integration in just a second, there was a lot of data points that came up that I normally don't have access to as a marketer in Sitecore. There was a buzzword, and we're going to go on more practical things, but we heard about firmographic data, some data points that really help to enrich the customer experience. And you mentioned something that really stuck with me here, was the whole thing about being able to identify a customer who's anonymous, and that was an IP address-based sort of identification. How does that work?
Yeah, so firmographics is essentially the same thing as demographics, but for a company. So the idea is that there's a profile, and companies have profiles like their revenue, the number of employees, the industry that they're in, those kinds of things. And what you want to do is you want to be able to take all of that really rich data and be able to match it with the visitor who is coming to the site. What we do is we don't have just IP matching. A lot of people have IP matching, but we enrich that with multiple data sets to make sure that it's really, really accurate, because a lot of that information that is in the registrars is incorrect or outdated. So we pull not just an IP address, but we pull a lot of information together to make sure the data is as accurate as possible. And then what we do is we give you access to that information. So it's not just the company's name, but also that profile that is around it so that you can take action on that.
I want to just make this really practical in the last few minutes that we have here. Here's an example that you gave us. So let's just walk us through. Right here, we're looking at potentially a Sitecore, a site that is by Acme Manufacturing. This is the unpersonalized view. But after we go through and we download and install the Demandbase integration, and then use some of the out-of-the-box personalization rules in Sitecore, we're able to then have a sort of a different experience for the account. And just highlight for me some of the things that are happening in these next few slides in terms of the personalization scenario that we can do in minutes, hours, and days very quickly as I go through.
Yeah, so basically the idea is that personalization, a lot of the stumbling blocks are that it takes too long. And there's some really simple things that you can do on your site today. Almost everybody on their homepage has the ability to what I would call merchandise content, the ability to, take maybe what you call the hero or your messaging area at the top, or the highlights of the content merchandising, and be able to just swap that with information or a message that would be tuned to, say, a certain industry that you're targeting. So in this case, it's financial institutions. We haven't changed any of the links or the imagery or anything. All we're doing is changing some messaging when we see an account that is visiting, or a visitor that is visiting from an account in the financial institution industry. So that's super simple. You can then also swap out the image, right? So you just change the message or swap out the image. That way you get a really, really effective personalization where it feels like the site is tuned just to me, and that will then increase your engagement overall.
Absolutely. And if you have a little bit more time, you can identify some content that might match that persona as well.
That's right. That's right. You can add content because you probably have case studies or something if it's an industry that you are focusing on. So you can swap out full sections of that content merchandising area.
Excellent. And then we see here that if an organization wants to spend just a little bit more time, maybe a week or so, can write some special purpose content to speak directly to that segment. So while they might see resources like this in one situation, in others, they might see the resources that are personalized, in this case for the financial segment. And all of this with anonymous users. which I found to be just really mind-blowing. Because honestly, folks, I mean, we always have this struggle with kind of customer experience. How do we get the user to identify themselves? Or maybe we have to gate the content. And we understand that we don't necessarily have to do that if we have this sort of data by IP address. So that's, for me, that was a great revelation, and really drove home the power of these sort of integrations. We're going to wrap up right here because we're getting close to the end of our time. I want to leave you with some of these highlights that, you know, we can use platforms like Demandbase to target at the top of the funnel, very targeted ads towards B2B accounts, you know, identify them, the anonymous users, and then to personalize that content and their journey along the way. You could also do some retargeting of those users to get them back and to re-engage with them on that front. There's some resources that are here on this slide that you're going to be able to access. So I'd encourage you to check them out. I think these will be available to you after the webinar, so you'll have some time to take those down. And lastly, I just want to shout out on our team, great developer Herdipo, who did the work to make this stuff work for Sitecore 9.3. I want to shout out Valer again. Yes, let's give Herdipo, he's often not praised. We're out in the front, but they're in the back doing all the hard work.
We're really at the end, Dennis.
Yes, I'm at the end myself. Shout out to Valer for open sourcing this for us again. And thanks for the opportunity, Allison, Sitecore. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to add the, Chris, you're going to be presenter now.
Hi, my name is Chris Nash. I specialize in digital experience optimization. I'm a Sitecore strategy MVP, and I've worked with omnichannel marketing for the past 20 years or more. So today I want to talk about using Sitecore outcome events with custom data and personalization. And you know, the background on this is that some months ago I was working on a project where we first had identified the customer journey strategy and then implemented the plumbing of data-driven personalization to support the strategy. So in the project, I discovered how useful Sitecore outcome events are, and that's what I want to share today. So in general, when using Sitecore to design and implement a data-driven customer journey, I think about the big conversions and the smaller interactions that occur. In Sitecore, you can use different types of events for tracking, triggering, and measuring. Goals are the most common. I tend to use goals sparingly. I use goals to track and measure what I think of as active engagement, you know, where the visitor reveals or directly provides important data. And when I work with goals, in most cases, they have engagement values. Page events I find are really useful. I use them to track events like important page views or forum views. In general, I think of this as passive engagement, where I might want to count or events or use certain events, passive events, as triggers. And then there are outcome events. I'd not work with outcomes that much, but I needed to capture data with, you know, for certain big conversion events that occurred in the customer journey I was working with. So I started to look into outcomes, and this is basically what I found. Conceptually, okay, so outcomes are out-of-the-box functionality in Sitecore, part of XConnect data model used with Sitecore Experience Database. Conceptually, outcomes are used to track and trigger macro events that occur in a customer journey, and that might be a macro event that contains revenue or a monetary value. In some cases, you may track the same event with both a goal and an outcome, and there are reasons why you might want to do this, which I'll get into. Except for Sitecore forums, outcomes need to be triggered programmatically. This is by design because outcomes are intended to support custom events. Outcomes are standard part of Sitecore Analytics, as well as standard part of the automation tool and the segmentation list manager in Sitecore, both really handy. Outcomes are also part of Sitecore Personalization. There are some standard personalization conditions, rules in Sitecore out of the box for using outcomes. And then, of course, you can create custom rules for personalization, which would most likely be the track to take. And very importantly, outcomes are extensible, as I found. Outcomes are designed to store data when an event occurs. Outcomes can be, you can create a custom outcome model, and within that, you would create custom facets to contain data, in your outcome. And this is why I find outcomes to be so useful. So let's see how you can work with outcomes in practice. So think about these use cases. These are what I think of as multi-step user flows, where the user provides data and advances through the flow with some actions. So booking a meeting with a bank, insurance quote, booking a stay at a resort, booking cinema tickets or a test drive for a car. Any multi-step flow where the user is providing data and there are events that occur, like to click through the flow. So let's look at how outcomes can work with such flows. Let's use booking a cinema ticket as an example. So the visitor enters the site. The visitor starts the booking process by, in this example, selecting cinema location, date, film, maybe a promotion. The visitor advances through the flow and selects things like, the location, seats or upsell or premium options, etc. The visitor completes the flow, maybe with payment or not, or contact information or not. And then very importantly, the visitor may abandon the flow at some point. These are also events that you would want to keep track of. So in a flow like this, I've used outcomes to capture data and store the data with the outcome in these custom facets. So things like, in this case, like the cinema name, the cinema location ID, the promotion name, the promotion ID, the film name, the film ID, the number of tickets, the viewing time, things, information around the seats, premium items, and so forth. And I've also used outcomes to trigger events for abandonment, so abandonment outcome events. So with that in mind, let's think about how the data is stored and how you can use it. This is a conceptual view of an experience profile in Sitecore. Each outcome can contain custom data. This is the data that you want to have in experience database to use for personalization insights. You don't need to store all of the data from the flow. So thinking about that example I just went through, you just need to store the data that you want to use for personalization based on your personalization strategy. Let me point out that, of course, this booking data also ends up in a back-end system for managing bookings, et cetera. But the idea here, and I think this is important, is to also capture the data in the Sitecore environment where the system is otherwise writing data from the visit. So potentially you're saving yourself the work of integration, and you can use the data immediately in the format that Sitecore requires for cacheable personalization at scale. So as I see it, the rule of thumb is, capture in the moment experience data in the system where the moment occurred, and in the system where you want to use the data to influence future moments of action and decision using personalization. So here is an actual experience profile in Sitecore. There was a requirement in the project for the Sitecore user to be able to view the data stored with each outcome. So those who are not familiar, when a visit occurs in Sitecore, the system keeps track of the visitor through what's essentially a contact record with a number of different things that could be stored, as I showed on the slide before. And in this case, we customize the grid where outcomes are displayed. So we customized the header along the top to contain the different preview fields of data in each outcome. And then each row here is a separate outcome that was triggered. And then there's also to the right a clickable link where the visitor can, or the Sitecore user can go in and look at specific data that has been stored in an individual outcome. So this is a convenience for the user. The data is stored in the database. The data can be used for personalization, for segmentation. And we added this, very important idea that you could view data, because it's what I find is it's very important for marketers to understand what data is actually there, to visualize the data in different ways so that they can understand better how to take advantage of that data. So yes, so finally, let's look at how outcomes can be used to trigger targeted personalization the idea of out-of-the-box rules and custom rules. So first of all, the outcome complete event. So think about like booking a test drive, booking a stay at a resort, booking a meeting for a bank. When that event occurs, subsequently when the visitor is in the same visit or in a return visit to the website or whatever the touch point is, that event can be used for for cross-sell, for confirmation, etc. The abandonment events, targeted personalization. If I've abandoned the film where booking the movie ticket or booking a resort stay where I've selected a particular promotion, particular number of people, particular date, data that's stored in the abandonment outcome that can be used for more targeted personalization using personal custom rule. As I've just explained with the outcome data, automation, segmentation, insights, data in Sitecore is extractable, can be used with automation, segmentation, those outcome events. And then a couple of things I think are interesting, pre-calculated personalization data. So imagine, for example, you can use the data stored in outcomes to pre-calculate things like next best action. For example, for cinema ticket buyers who have in the past selected premium seats when the film was an action film, you could prepare, calculated value that is used to show promotion for premium seats as the next best action, should the user be back and booking an action film or otherwise, for example. And then finally, something I call conceptual outcomes. And I think this is also interesting. I think, the abandonment outcome is an idea of a conceptual outcome, something I've made up. In e-commerce, for example, a big challenge is to get a first-time buyer to become a second-time buyer. So when triggering outcomes for purchase complete, consider to generate, outcomes such as, first-time purchase complete, second-time purchase complete, et cetera. The things you want to optimize make them more obvious and more intuitive as events in the system. That's the point. And you could also generate outcomes based on intelligence gained in external data segmentation tools that use, for example, AI or other techniques. So you can use intelligence to generate outcome events such as, loyal customer achieved or dormant customer, reached or churn customer. So you could trigger these as events from an external system, and you can trigger them into Sitecore via API for targeted experience profiles, and then use those for personalization. So there it was, a lightning talk, 10 minutes, therefore I'm talking so quickly. Hit me up on LinkedIn if you have any questions. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Alexei, and I will try to inspire you to use Sitecore personalization based on Salesforce data by sharing the customer story and the approach we took to personalize on Sitecore based on Salesforce data. So to get started, do you see presentation or? Okay. So let's start with some customer context and the challenges we had while starting the project. Imdad is a Middle East leader in aesthetic medicine laser equipment. Imdad sells very sophisticated equipment, and the sales process takes time and multiple offline meetings and calls. Until last year, when we implemented Sitecore, it was traditional offline B2B company. Imdad operates in 10 countries in the Middle East region, which is very sensitive to cultural differences, especially when it comes to aesthetic medical services. Imdad offers different products and various legislation restrictions apply. To give you an example, in Saudi Arabia, one of the treatments cannot be shown on the website. It was extremely important to identify the location of the visitors and show content accordingly. Digital transformation for Imdad started with Salesforce platform. They have well-established Salesforce sales and service cloud, and over time Imdad collected massive amounts of data about its contacts and accounts. In fact, one of the KPIs for their sales team is to collect first-party data, including information about the location of each contact, who the decision makers are, profession of contacts, as well as competitive products installed at the clinics and hospitals. IMDAT claimed to have almost 100% of all clinics and hospitals registered in CRM. And based on data available in CRM and information in the market insights platform they have established, IMDAT can predict the customer's future needs and the next product to be purchased. And we call it Next IMDAT product. And we could not miss the chance to use this data on the website. If you're building personalization based on visitor behavior, it will most probably require multiple visitor sessions before you can identify a pattern match. And with data available in Salesforce or another CRM, marketers can accelerate the results from the first or second visit instead of waiting for a profile to be collected and patterns to match. And don't get me wrong, behavior-based personalization is a powerful tactic, especially for anonymous visitors, and we also used it in this project. Moving on to practical setup, here is a quick look at the Salesforce account and contacts. Here we have the IMDAT Next product field set by salesperson based on account purchase history, competitive products installed, offline communication, and market insights. This field may contain multiple products. We also transfer this information to a contact entity along with other important information we use for personalization on the website. Now the data is in Salesforce and we need to move it to Sitecore for personalization to be enabled. We used S4S connector from FuseIT. We identified actionable data we need in Sitecore, configured it in the mappings, and whenever data gets changed in Salesforce, it will be pushed to Sitecore and saved as a contact facet in the Sitecore experience database. This integration works pretty much in real time. It took us a couple of weeks to enable all endpoints and mappings and customize some integration aspects. You are not obviously limited to using FuseIT connector. You can consider using Salesforce connector from Sitecore or build your own integration. The main idea is that it's not rocket science and it doesn't take long to integrate the data, thanks to the extensive integration capabilities of both platforms. Once the data is available in Sitecore experience database, we can make use of it for out-of-the-box rules-based personalization. We do so primarily on the route and landing pages. Notice that we use standard out-of-the-box country-based condition, although the data comes from Salesforce. Visitor location context is so important for IMDAT that we had to make Sitecore use multiple sources of geolocation information, including data from Salesforce if the contact is identified. And by overriding information in Sitecore tracker, we can use out-of-the-box location conditions. IMDAT has over 20 major products, and establishing rules-based personalization would be a nightmare for marketers, especially given that Next IMDAT product value may have multiple products defined in Salesforce. For every component you want to personalize, you need to set up like 20 conditions. Instead, we created taxonomy where each tag matches a product, and product tags are further associated with various content types such as product, treatment, navigation item, various media items, treatment results, etc., etc. We have the same taxonomy established for countries. Let's say we have a contact with Gentle Max Pro set as the next in that product, and this contact is from Emirates according to the data from Salesforce. So instead of using traditional personalization, we search for content related to Gentle Max Pro and country tags, and this way we personalize content. In this way, personalized content will be populated automatically without efforts from the marketing team. Multiple website components are built to promote the next in that product, matching contact Salesforce facet data using content search engine. For some components, content is filtered by country tag and sorted by matching next in that product tag. For other components, both country and next in that product tags will be used to filter the content or just sort the content. So again, this way we can promote personalized content based on Salesforce profile automatically without efforts from a marketing team. Speaking of the challenges, personalization with Salesforce data will obviously require contacts to be identified on the website. The more contacts get identified, the higher outcome you can expect from this personalization tactic. Sending emails with Sitecore Email Experience Manager may help you increase the number of contacts identified. Consider various incentives to make visitors submit forms or log in, and you should also measure the number of contacts identified. Another challenge is to address complex data relationships available in Salesforce, and this is where we used some formulas and some Apex triggers to simplify Salesforce data synced to Sitecore context facets. Finally, personalized components cannot be cached in Sitecore content delivery server, which may affect the performance. And when using search for personalization, consider using cloud-hosted search engines such as Algolia and offloading the search query to be performed by front end. And overall, the results for new implementation are very positive. We have good increase in traffic, and interestingly, in May during lockdown, traffic to the website tripled, indicating people are changing their habits and rapidly shift to online channels. The most valuable outcome is the percentage of marketing qualified leads converted to customers. 11% is a higher conversion ratio for selling capital equipment. So if you have valuable actionable data in Salesforce or another CRM, be sure to plan for integration, and you're not limited to use just personalization based on Salesforce data. You can use segmentation and have your email campaigns targeted based on Salesforce data. You can utilize this data in marketing automation, and you will most probably improve your analytics based on this data. So that's it. Thank you very much for attending this webinar.
Well, thank you everybody for hanging out this long, and my topic's probably not as exciting as everybody else's. However, equally important because as you've heard throughout each of the talks, through all of the personalization, you're going to be collecting data. And just before I start, I just want to make a disclaimer that this presentation is not legal advice by any means of the stretch of the imagination. It's not to be construed as legal advice, even though we will be covering some aspects of the GDPR and privacy concerns around it. I called it privacy initially and GDPR because we're going to focus on how Sitecore kind of facilitates using GDPR and or complying with GDPR. And so we'll get right into it. First, I guess we'll start with, kind of what is GDPR? Well, GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation. That's a legal framework which sets basically guidelines for the collection and the processing of personal information. And this is a key note that I've found out recently, which is that live in the European Union. Now, you may be thinking, well, I'm in Canada or I'm in the US or I'm in another part of the world, so what does this have to do with me? Well, as you know, with Sitecore, we're dealing with brands that are global. And so chances are that somebody from this part of the world may visit your site and you may want to personalize, and they may be actual customers of yours. So it's important that you understand the GDPR and obviously facilitate the requirements and meet those requirements so that you don't violate this regulation. There are some fairly stiff financial penalties if you do. I like to summarize the compliance into two things, really, basically transparency and accessibility. These are the two keys. As with all these regulations, they're ever changing and ever evolving as people make up their minds as to what they want to share and what they want to have collected about them. And so the two things that are very important. One is transparency and accessibility. And accessibility means really the right for the customer to have access to the information that we've collected on them. And so how does Sitecore help us in being compliant? Well, Sitecore by default has a privacy by design. So everything that it builds on this platform, it takes into account and enables developers and those using the platform to achieve compliance through various things that are already baked and built into the system. And we're going to talk about some of those things. A little caveat, some assembly required. You may need a developer for some of these things. But in the end, Sitecore does give us the capabilities that we need to be compliant. At a high level, data that is stored on a customer is encrypted into the database and stored securely. The information that you collect on the visitors or your customers, the personally identifiable information, PI as it's called, can be marked and also flagged for a specific type of processing. And you can also, and by default, the indexing of this information is disabled, so that meaning that the information can't be searched or viewed by prying eyes. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, Sitecore starts with a privacy by design first approach, which means visibility, transparency, and most importantly, the respect for the end user's data is kept in the highest regard. And by now, so how does this all come together and how does it all work within the Sitecore platform? So by now, everyone around the world has probably come across one of these. Our site uses cookies type messages. And this actually speaks to transparency and covers references or articles within the GDPR, Articles 4.1, Article 12, and Article 13, whereby we have to tell people that we are collecting information, number one, and number two, how we intend to use it. And you can achieve this obviously through this type of dialog box, and then of course allowing people to accept whether or not they want to use or allow you to track them using cookies. The important thing about this one thing, the acceptance of the cookies, is that should you be asked as to whether or not someone has accepted cookies, you can actually use within Sitecore a trigger to store that information into the XDB with a date. And I'm not sure how well you can see the screen, but that little highlighted box in the bottom right corner is kind of on the experience profile is an indication that the person has consented to cookies being used to track them and the date on which that was done. And this is a best practice. When even though you may have a message on your screen, if you're not tracking the actual acceptance of that cookie, you're putting yourself at risk of being questioned about it. So obviously track that information and store it somewhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the experience profile, but I think it's very convenient if your marketers do want to see, or if someone wants to see it, you can actually quickly go into Sitecore and see that on the experience profile. This also can be extracted into a report. And Sitecore comes with several APIs, one specifically called the Get Contact Async method, which allows you to retrieve the full profile and the historical behavior of the data that you've collected on a particular user. And this covers the right, this is called the right of access, and which is covered in Article 15. And there are others that, and this also speaks to accessibility. So if somebody asks for the information that you've collected, you can actually export that, and you can present them with either a spreadsheet or some kind of data, depending on what they've asked for, using that get contact async method to retrieve a full contact profile, and keeps you compliant. The right to rectification, this covers the article number 16 within the GDPR. And essentially, we want to give the people that we've collected data on the ability to have their information corrected. Either that's through themselves or if they submit a request through your call center. But of course, if you're scaling this through thousands of customers, you may want to present a profile. And you can easily do this within Sitecore through Sitecore forms. And as the Salesforce gentleman mentioned, all of that can be passed back into your CRM. And again, Sitecore enables all of that. The right to erasure, this is a requirement under Article 17, whereby if a customer wants to eventually be, let's say, for example, you've collected information and we now know their email address, we know their last name, we've collected a whole bunch of data for personalization, and at some point, an individual wants to now become anonymous once again, they have that right under the GDPR, Article 17, to request that. And Sitecore has a method called the execute right to be forgotten method, which will anonymize any customer contact within the XDB. So in the experience profile where you would have all of the data, it would now become essentially dashes or anonymous data. The beauty of this is that it doesn't actually remove all of the history, it just removes anything that identifies that person as an individual or personally identifies them. And we can set which fields get expunged, if you will, through what they call a sensitive flag. So you can flag certain content as being sensitive data. And when that command is executed, either through a customer's response or a button click, that information would essentially be expunged from the XDB, and you'd be able to continue without breaking compliance rules. Last but not least, the right to restrict processing. So as was mentioned in a couple of these presentations about the email experience manager from Sitecore, allowing people to subscribe and unsubscribe from lists and things like that is very important to this, to being compliant. It also is a good customer experience when you can actually choose what you want to receive and how often and so on. And again, a lot of this can be, this is out of the box actually, a lot of the stuff, the Experience Profile Center, and this can also be customized to suit your needs and the type of list that you collect and so on. So there you have it, hopefully under 10 minutes. And let's see, transparency through the use of cookies, terms of use, privacy policy. Sorry?
No, you're good. Keep going.
Yep. All right. And then, of course, accessibility through customer portals, automated requests to be forgotten, and Sitecore's Preference Center. There's also a white paper if you want more details on this at Sitecore's website. It's called Sitecore and GDPR, pretty straightforward, and you can get it there. So once again, I'd like to thank everybody for hanging around this long, and specifically, I'd like to thank Allison, Tomas, Jacqueline, Amanda, and the rest of the SMAC team. And hopefully you'll stay compliant and not be smacked with a lawsuit.
I see what you did there, Ken. I see that. Okay, look, we are right on the hour now, so that is fantastic. And thank you to all of our presenters for taking part in this, because it's not easy. It's actually a lot of work to do a talk in 10 minutes. And thanks to everybody for attending. I hope you found it valuable. Basically, all I've got to do is wrap up and say thank you to the rest of my SMAC team. As Ken said, Jackie Baxter, Christian von Magius from Copenhagen, Amanda Shiga, Jill Grzolski, Tomas, the always present Tomas, as well. So, and basically to say that the, I hope you're all enjoying the SMAC newsletter. Please get those articles and videos over to us. It's going out monthly and it's got lots of good stuff in it. The next webinar will be July. I think this one was fantastic. I would love to see some new voices in July. Some people who haven't been in the MVP community before. This is your chance. 10 minutes, guys. Let's do it. And then obviously Symposium is virtual. So, which sucks in some ways because I don't get to eat pizza and shop till I drop in on the Miracle Mile, but it does mean that it makes it a lot easier to present. So really hoping to see a lot of really good strategy presentations at that. So that is it, everybody. Thank you very much.